Good morning, friends, and welcome to Aisha Presents Nayi Soch Naye Raaste, a Trans India exclusive. Let me start with a very controversial statement, which a few may disagree, but I'm hoping that a large number of people will agree. A daughter is very close to her mother, especially in a crisis, and if need be, she will leave everything to be by her side. This daughter left everything she had in the US and moved to India with her husband to be by her mother's side. I cannot even imagine the amount of blessings the daughter would have received, and that is perhaps one of the secrets of her success in business. We are delighted to be with Nikita Garodia, who is now an integral part of ANVA Logistics, a 3PL company started by her father, Vijay Garodia. Interestingly, Nikita's strength is numbers, and that is what transport companies need the most. Calculations and systems that tell you exactly where the company stands in terms of profits. It was definitely not an easy journey for Nikita, moving from the US to India during the toughest times of her generation, COVID. And her reason for moving to India only compounded her challenge. However, her strength, resilience, and courage took her through testing times to emerge a winner. Let's see the journey of Nikita, how she fell into the transport industry, and her contribution to the company on the other side of this very short break. You are watching Aisha Presents Nayi Soch Naye Raaste, a Trans India exclusive.
अरे वाह, आज सिर्फ 2 मिनट 23 सेकंड लेट।
हमेशा टाइम पे, ये कैसे पॉसिबल है?
दिन भर डिलीवरी के बाद भी फूलों की तरह इतना फ्रेश, ये कैसे पॉसिबल है?
भाई साहब,
अरे जब तक आप बता दो।
8 घंटे की शिफ्ट, 132 किलोमीटर और बाकी डिटेल्स आपको ईमेल कर दी।
सारा हिसाब ऐप पर, ये कैसे पॉसिबल?
अरे भाई एक्सपर्ट है
तो पॉसिबल है।
Introducing Aisha Pro X, an electric first SCV co-created with experts. Expert है तो possible है।
Welcome back to Aisha Presents Nayi Soch Naye Raaste, a Trans India exclusive. We will be talking today to Nikita Garodia, who leads ANVA Logistics along with her father, Vijay.
So Nikita, to start with, tell us about ANVA Logistics. When did the company start? What's the background to this?
So actually our company was started in 1997 and initially we kind of fell into it by a happy accident. So my father was doing some work with tankers, oil tankers in around Mumbai area, and we would work in the northeast mostly.
Okay.
And then so he was associated with Hindustan Unilever for some time. But what happened was then he kind of decided not to do that anymore, but he still stayed in touch with them.
Okay.
And my grandfather at the time was living in Varanasi. So he basically was looking for some business that would be a good opportunity for my grandfather, that's easy to manage, and he was also getting a bit bored. He had some time on his hands. So then Hindustan Unilever approached us and they said, we have our depot in Varanasi. It's a great opportunity. Why don't you try for it? We already know your work ethic. We know that you guys are very good. So they ended up getting the depot and the transport contract for that. So it was very humble beginnings.
So tell me, you mean to say your granddad had nothing better to do, so you gave him a transport company?
You could say that actually.
Guys actually run away from a transport company, especially back then, and you got him into it.
Yeah, so I think at that time, from what I hear from my father and grandfather, I wasn't involved at the time, but it was a very fun business to be in compared to, I think, what it is now. I think the margins as such were not that much of a challenge. Plus, for the depot, the thing was that it was not as much of a hassle. We were not really transporters. We were more like the CFA for Hindustan Unilever and managing that portion of the transport.
The transport was a small part of the entire business.
Exactly. Plus it was, you had the orders coming in. It's not like you had to go to the market and try to win contracts. I think we had 10-15 trucks when we started. And the rest of the work was done purely with the market. And the market, and that time in Banaras, still the case now, there were very few market transporters. So it was kind of a very set thing. I'm sure he had his challenges.
Yes.
But I remember when we were growing up, and I would be very excited because we would have all these, cartons that, damaged goods that would come home. I think now the policy has changed. But at that time, there were Lux soaps and...
that's how it was?
Yeah, and the detergents. And it would be so much fun as a child. And I thought this is the best business in the world. Because I remember going to Varanasi for Diwali vacations, and we would go to the depot and see everything, and everything would smell so good and be so well organized. So it was... like a child in a candy store, kind of, almost.
Is this what attracted you to this business?
No, actually, as I was telling you, it has been a very, very interesting path for me, and the journey has been really far from logistics.
So take us through it. How did you get into this?
So what happened was basically when I was growing up, of course, I heard my dad interact and, hear a little bit about the business back and forth. But it was never really, in my mind. I've always been someone who loves learning, who loves exploring, and I've always been someone who's like, you should make very intentional choices. So I did not want to join the family business just because it's, the next logical step or the most accessible step. So I wanted, and my father and my grandfather both were very encouraging. So they said, you join it if you are interested. If you're not interested, then, set out your own career path. It's okay. So basically what ended up happening was that when I was 17, I moved to the US. So I moved there for my undergrad. And I ended up studying science, cinematic arts and business. So a mishmash of everything. And then during this time, I wanted to take the full opportunity to explore every industry. So I did internships at Times of India, CBS Television and Disney and AXA, Investment Advisors, investment banking. And then I realized that, I really enjoy this whole concept of having an exposure to so many different industries. And I think I was also in that stage where I still wanted to learn so much. So when I graduated, I decided to stay in Los Angeles. And then I worked with a consulting firm there for a couple of years. And then I think sometimes life has its own plans for you. So unfortunately, I applied for the H-1B visa that you must be familiar with. It's a pure lottery-based visa. Worked very hard, had a great GPA, but it's purely luck-based, so did not get selected. And I was very heartbroken, and I think that was one juncture where I thought about moving back. But then something in me said, maybe you should try studying. So I had developed a really keen interest in finance. So I thought, I'm going to give it my all. So while I was working, I simultaneously started prepping for my master's, and I had made up in my mind that only if I get into the global top 5 schools, I'm going to do this. Otherwise, I'm not going to, I'll come back and figure out what is the next step. But luckily got into Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT.
Brilliant.
Did my master's in finance there. And that was a very fun journey. I got to take, econometrics classes, computer science courses on the MIT campus, like negotiation courses at Harvard. And I think it was just really fun because, again, I think I'm someone who loves learning a lot about different things rather than going deep into one thing specifically. So it was just like it opened up my worldview even more. And post that, I got an offer as a cross-asset market trader at BNP Paribas Bank in New York.
Lovely.
So joined the Wall Street life. And it was very volatile and fast paced and super exciting. And
Absolutely.
I think I was loving trading because it was just every day is different. There's
Absolutely.
a different position to hedge. There's different things happening in the market. And again, I think life kind of, came at a standstill for me. So COVID pandemic happened and it was fine, but then we found out that my mom had been diagnosed with cancer.
Oh my God.
So it was really heartbreaking because I think I had never thought that someone in my family, let alone my mother, would get this disease. It was,
I mean, nobody prepares you for this.
yeah, and it's just like the I think more than the disease itself, it's the fear and anticipation of that C word.
Absolutely.
It's so scary, and I thought my life had ended, and in that immediate super emotional decision. But I said, at that time, I remember there was an air bubble, so it was very difficult to get a flight back to Mumbai.
True.
I remember I told my managers at the bank, I said, I don't think I can do this. Like, I need to go back immediately. They were super supportive. So they gave me a sabbatical.
Okay.
They said, go take care of her for 6 months and come back. So I was kind of happy also that I had that fallback option.
Right,
But I think that whole experience during my mom's treatment was just a big turning point in my life. Completely transformed everything. I think it really puts into perspective what is important in life.
Absolutely does.
And
especially when it's your mom.
yeah, and it was just so, I mean, I think the worst thing we were fearing at that time was my parents getting COVID, and when we got this news,
Exactly.
it was just, it felt like the world had collapsed. And her treatment was super aggressive, but I think that's when I gained a lot of appreciation for India. One was because how were they dealing so well with the pandemic at the time? I remember I came back, it was the first wave was kind of in swing, and the protocols in place, the treatment centers, the cleanliness they were keeping was so impressive
That's nice.
compared to what I'd seen. And strangely enough, that's when I saw like a little bit of what's happening at ANVA, because I was never really around so much to see the meetings, the phone calls, the work. But when I would see my dad that time coordinating on the phone, he would be speaking to the customers, he would be speaking to the the fleet operators, coordinating that, speaking to the warehouse managers. And I saw just how resilient this whole ecosystem was, that in something so unpredictable and unlikely like the pandemic, I think our warehouse did not shut down a single day.
Oh.
So it was so impressive to me how this whole industry kind of adapted to this environment. Because I remember when I was at my bank, we had to shut down some of the core operations for 1 or 2 weeks because traders had never worked from home. Like, that was not a
Absolutely, yes,
concept.
yes.
And to see that in logistics, this is what was happening with people who are not necessarily educated and don't necessarily have the right tech. So I think that's when I started getting introduced to ANVA.
And I think transport is the only industry which actually, transport and then medication, these are the industries which did not stop for even a moment.
Not even.
I mean, there was a lockdown and transport was the only thing which was moving.
Yeah, and I remember that, we were concerned about our drivers, our staff falling sick, getting COVID.
That was a tough call again.
Yeah, and I remember during the first wave, there was not a single employee of ours had COVID or tested positive. We had daily tests that were done. We had all the equipment on hand. We had, oxygen tanks in case anyone required it. But, unfortunately, second wave was a different story. But the first wave was beautifully handled, and it was just, I think more than anything, I think what is super impressive about India and the people here is just the resilience and the tenacity they have.
Absolutely.
I saw that whether it was in the hospital with the nurses or whether it was, with our drivers and our staff, they were ready to work, they were ready to get going.
Actually, yes. The drivers were, they were on the highways.
Yeah.
How did the name ANVA come about? It doesn't mean anything, right?
No, so ANVA, it does actually. So my father came up with the name ANVA, and it's basically, he wanted to kind of have a name that exemplifies the entire family.
Okay.
So each letter in the name is the first letter of our family members' names. So A is Archana for my mom.
Right.
N is Nikita, that's me. V is Vijay, that's my dad. And A is Anvesha, that's my younger sister.
Oh, wonderful. So, Nikita, what does ANVA Logistics actually do? What are the operations or the spaces where you work?
So at ANVA, we basically, so as I told you, our birth or how we started was basically we started with warehousing and did secondary transportation. And now we are basically an end-to-end logistics provider. So in the sense, what we do is we do the land procurement, we do the designing of the warehouses, whether it's mechanized or whether it's a traditional warehouse. We also do management of the warehouse on behalf of the clients. So we act as CFAs.
Okay.
So we have clients like Asian Paints, Pepsi Foods, HUL for whom we do this. And then also we do transportation. So our forte used to be secondary transport, but now we are also getting into more long haul transport, primary transport as well, and then direct dispatch. So trying out different models of transport now.
So you're actually a logistics company in true sense and not just the name of it, unlike some others.
Yes, that's what we try to be. And I think that has been a big differentiator for us in a sense, because I think we've seen that a lot of clients now, like, I think when I first came into the business, I was very curious about this, that
This was post-COVID, right? I mean, you joined immediately after COVID or you waited for a while?
No, so again, there was a little bit of a story. So I think it was like ANVA wanted me to join at the right time. I think it was like that destiny had
Waiting to happen.
So when after my mom's treatment, again decided to stay back in India, very emotional and, wanted to make sure I did not want to ever have to wait 24 hours to see her.
Right.
And so I think what happened was then I ended up joining a wealth management startup called Deserve. So I was one of the first founding team members.
Okay.
I think I was the 12th or 13th person on the team. I think now they're massive. And I think that experience was amazing because I had only worked for big companies before. And I think what that really taught me and what I'm trying to bring to ANVA is how can we be a small or a medium company, but from day one, act like a big company, have that vision, have those systems, have that structure so that we are prepared and future ready. And I think I was very blessed that I got to see that with Deserve. So during this time I started, I remember Papa was working on some, he had to do some digitization that clients were requesting and some reports, and he's very, I think, a little scared of tech, if that's the right word.
Yes, I mean, not surprisingly, I mean, the older gen was a little wary of tech.
Yeah, I think for him it was always this fear of, I think now things are better because, I mean, things have gotten a lot more easier also. But I remember he was very worried about how we're going to do it. So I started helping him on the side. And I realized, okay, this is actually quite cool and interesting. And it's, not what I've made up in my head to be. Like, it's actually quite fun to help him out. And then, we were talking about it. And then I thought, he spoke to me and he's like, see, if you're... there's no pressure. I've never put any pressure on you. But if you're liking this, why don't you consider joining?
Full-time, yes. Why not?
Yeah, because it's not, I think entrepreneurship is not a part-time job and neither is being in a startup.
Correct.
So it was really getting too much. So I spoke to my founders there and they were very nice, but they were a little hesitant. There was like, like from Wall Street now you want to go to, trucking. In Varanasi, in UP and Bihar. Like, what is, are you sure? Like, what is like what you've never done this before, you've only worked in multinational companies or even the startup was a jump for you, and now in India you want to sit and run a transport business. So there was that hesitation, but I think at that point I'd made up my mind that if I'm joining ANVA, then I have to make sure that one is I can contribute meaningfully. Absolutely. And I have to take it forward. Because otherwise my dad had discussed that if you don't want to come in, there's no pressure, we'll get someone else to manage it. And he also wanted to make sure that I am the right person to take it forward and not this other person. Because
absolutely,
I think with family business, we cannot take it for granted that we have the privilege to be doing this. But I think it's just as precious as any other professional opportunity. So
and nepotism doesn't really work here. It can completely go haywire. But tell me, what was the major differences you saw working for multinationals and then working for an Indian typical trucking company? It would have been stark.
It was massive. It was like, I think, like poles apart. Because I remember my first day at ANVA and, I come from this, working with all these companies where you have a structured orientation and training program.
Right.
And here I am at ANVA and I'm sitting in our depot where there's no women's washroom. And I'm sitting with my dad's cabin, like I'm sitting on the chair, like, where the staff sits, and I'm just trying to figure out what is going on. They're having a conversation, I have no idea. They're writing things on paper. And luckily what happened for me was, I think it was my 5th day of joining. I met this gentleman who gave me the best piece of advice, and he said, if you are doing a family business and you're expecting that your father is going to teach you, you will never succeed. He said he will never be able to treat you like a normal employee as much as he loves you. He's not going to be able to train you, coach you the way he would any other employee. So you have to take that onus and that burden of your training on yourself.
That's interesting.
So that was a game changer for me, because I remember the first few days, honestly, there were a lot of fights because I said, I'm not understanding anything, like teach me. And he would not have time to teach me, he would not be able to teach me, and he would not be able to correct me when I was saying something wrong.
Right.
So I immediately decided, I said, no, you know what, like to learn, first I have to understand everything. I cannot come from a place of like trying to delegate from a distance. I don't know anything about the business.
True.
So I was like, at least 6 to 7 months, I just want to learn each and every aspect of the business from the ground up. So I just started. I remember I would just go and sit with the staff, and just in trading, we have this concept called shadowing. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
So, and that's basically what they make you do in the internship.
Correct.
Is, just sit behind and watch what someone is doing. And it's actually quite, interesting, because when people are in their natural environment, and at some point it'll be awkward for them, but then they get comfortable, and then you actually get to observe what they're doing. And
But how was their reaction like? I mean, the boss's daughter right behind them being the shadow. I mean, how scary is that?
It was not great at first, to be honest. I think there was a lot of fear, and there was that.
Understandably so, yes.
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, is she spying on us? Like, is she going to go tell her dad things? Like, what is she trying to do?" There's a lot of kind of mistrust and fear, and then also there's, which I can understand, because having been on the other side for almost 10 years, that like how she just gets to do this, like it's they're just born into this. And I didn't want to just inherit my place, like I really wanted to earn it.
Absolutely.
And so I think it took a lot of time, but I kept showing up day after day. I kept asking them questions, understanding. And I think the important thing was giving them that respect. And because they are the experts, right? They have been doing it for 10, 12 years, and who am I, to come in and tell them what to do? First, I have to so before, trying to do anything fun like tech or strategizing or any of that, I remember I was doing simple things like listening in on how are they talking to drivers. I remember one time they were loading a truck and I was standing. I went for a tea break with them. They all got very awkward because they're like, what are you doing? But I think that's how these bonds kind of get formed. And I think that's how when they see that, okay, she's really trying to learn, because someone can put on a pretense for 1 month,
not for
2 months, but not for 6 to 7 months. And I think when they saw that I'm genuinely here to learn and I genuinely care, I think then that mutual...
Their attitude changed as well.
Yeah, there was a massive change, because I was not even one of those typical family business kids who ends up going to office with their father. So they had not seen me. I was a stranger to them, and then I'm suddenly in the environment, and I'm suddenly, everyone's told that this is the boss's daughter and she's now wanting to work in the business. And so I can completely understand their perspective. So it took time, but I think luckily now it's a great place where there's a lot of mutual respect and trust. I think now the good part is sometimes they're scared to tell my dad things. They'll come and tell me. They're worried about
which I think is a very good thing to happen.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing, because I think we're discussing this, that sometimes just listening to them is the biggest factor.
Absolutely.
Because there are, and I think and as I said, the good thing about me is, having been an employee for so many years, I could kind of empathize with them also and understand sometimes.
You've been on both sides.
Yeah, like they're not being unreasonable when they're asking for some things. So I think that really helped.
We will continue our interaction with Nikita after this very short break. You are watching Aisha Presents Nayi Soch Naye Raaste, a Trans India exclusive.
कभी सोचा है, अगर किसी दिन सब कुछ रुक गया तो इन छोटी छोटी खुशियों पे लाइफ पे ब्रेक लग गया तो किसी ने तो जिम्मेदारी ली होगी कि सब स्मूथली चलता रहे। कोई ऐसा
जो ऐसे स्टीयरिंग थामे हैं कि हम ना रुके। जो वक्त से आगे की सोच रखता हो, नए रास्ते बनाता हो। शुक्र है जिंदगी की ड्राइविंग सीट पे कोई तो बैठा है, क्योंकि जब हम चलेंगे तो दुनिया चलेगी। आयशर के साथ रहिए 24/7 कनेक्टेड, ताकि ना आपका बिजनेस रुके, ना लाइफ। नई सोच, नए रास्ते।
But Nikita, coming from a finance background, did that help you in the transport business as well?
So I think yes and no. I think where it did not help was, I think I had a very kind of like structured way of wanting to do things. I was, very like meticulous about like what has to be done on a day-to-day basis. Like I had a set, schedule, even though every day was different in trading. Like, you're used to having a certain pattern in place, and that doesn't happen in entrepreneurship, especially not in logistics. I think every day can be a new puzzle or a new challenge. So I think that's where it was different, but I think a lot of things did help. I think because of my experiences there, I had a very systems first approach.
Okay.
I remember that any time we were doing a trade also, we would look at all the factors, kind of analyze. There were frameworks for everything that we had. There were models. So even here what helped is whenever there was a problem and it was very complex and it came up, and I would always think about, okay, let's break this down. Like how can we, get to the bottom of this? Yes. Instead of just getting overwhelmed and being like, okay, or just try to come up with some jugaad solution, I said, okay, but this, and especially if a problem is happening again and again and again, that means it needs a long-term solution. So I think that systems first approach definitely came from the prior background that I had.
Okay.
And then I also think a lot of knowledge of finance and corporate finance, I think it's very essential in transport, because
that helped you, I'm sure.
Yeah, because my dad is a chartered accountant himself, and he's very, very particular about, making sure that our finances are rock solid. He feels that finance is, the backbone of the business. And so I think with having that background in finance, I was able to pick up a lot of his way of doing things, understand where he's coming from, what ratios is he looking at, what models, etc. So I think that's where it definitely helped.
But I mean, both of you from a very strong finance background, do you guys know exactly the operating cost of your truck?
Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, because this is what we kind of talk about too. I think the thing is there's so many different components that go into the operations of a truck, right? And we were just discussing this, that sometimes you have to, be able to sit, like now one thing we've started doing now is we want to know the daily profit of our trucks, like the operational profit.
Okay.
So we know the freight we're generating.
Right.
We know, kind of the per kilometer cost, or we know like what is the diesel cost, we know the driver's salary, like some of the known variables.
Right.
And then of course budgeting for some unknowns like repairs, accidents, or extra diesel due to route diversion. So we've started doing that now. Is on a daily basis we should have a snapshot, basically, where we are able to see on a sheet like this is the performance today, this is how our trucks have done. But I still think, like, do we know the 100% accurate operating cost? I'm not sure, because there's so many different components.
Right. But tell me, since you've joined the business, has this business been a profitable one?
Yes, I think it has. I mean, to be honest, I remember like initially when my dad was running the business, there was not so much concern about profitability. And I know since the year that I moved back, I started hearing this conversation a lot more from him about, how the margins are getting squeezed and things are getting more difficult. And I think once I joined the business also, and we started speaking to some of our clients, we would have these negotiations, right, where you would expect, we've done a 1-year contract, we are renewing the contract, costs have gone up, inflation's gone up, but they want to reduce the freight. And I think it's very common in the industry now.
Absolutely, it is. So since you joined, that day to now, have the margins squeezed further or they've remained there?
I think it depends on what kind of work also you're doing.
On an overall, from ANVA Logistics books, Do you think the profit has reduced in the last 2 or 3 years, or they've remained there?
I think the profit has reduced from a percentage basis, but I think we've grown our trucks also. I think when I joined, we were at 120 trucks or so. Now we are at around 250 trucks. So I think on a volume basis,
The volumes
profits
have grown.
increased, and I think that's how you have to be in logistics. You have to play on scale. You have to play on sustainability. And I don't think it's that bad also in terms of an industry, because otherwise you wouldn't have good transporters in the business.
Absolutely.
There is profits to be made, of course. Like we are trying to do measures like efficiency, we are trying to introduce tech and all of these to protect our margins further, see what can be done from our cost center perspective. So margins, I think if you look at it on a percentage basis, have reduced, but I think there's still a lot more that transporters can do, that we are exploring from our side to kind of keep our margins healthier and make sure. and
Margins
say-
are down, but the bank is happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it has to be, because
That's how it works.
yeah, you're not going to survive, and otherwise you would not do this.
So Nikita, you spoke about the negotiations, being with your customers, and you've done a course in the negotiation as well from the US. Did that help in any way?
I think it helped in the sense that but I think again there's a thin line between book knowledge and when you actually have to do in the real world. And I remember coming in and I told my dad, okay, what's our bat now? It's like the best alternative. And he was like, what is all this? He's like, this is not going to apply here. You realize that we have to close it now. It's like your technical knowledge is not going to help. So I remember telling him, okay, are we doing a win-win or are we doing a win-lose? He said, nothing matters. At the end of the day, you have to walk out of the negotiation. You have to get what you want, but the other person has to feel like they got more than you. And he said, that's the secret of a good negotiation. And I realized, okay, this is something that no one has ever taught me in any class. So, fortunately, my dad is excellent at negotiations, and he does it in a way. He's a big believer in, I think, making the pie bigger rather than just dividing the pie. So, one thing, I've always seen him do is when we are negotiating also, he won't just be like, okay, here's the rate for the lanes that you asked for. He's going to actually be like, okay, sir, this is the problem I think that you might face in the future, and this is a slightly more unique solution, a little more expensive, but here is how it's going to help you save costs here, here and here. So maybe entertain this as well. And like strangely enough, sometimes other transporters may not suggest a solution like this, and then we end up getting the contract just because of this creative solution that we've offered.
Brilliant. So actually, so solutions actually work more than just the rate cutting part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can enter a client or you can enter a company. You can win a contract based on your rates initially, but ultimately, if you're not able to provide service, you will be out of the game, because transport is not like you're selling something and then they come back to you after 6 months.
Correct.
You provide the service day in, day out.
Absolutely.
And
Nikita, what is the biggest challenge you face in your business today?
I think there are a couple of challenges I think that we are facing right now. One of the big ones, and I think a lot of people are facing, is definitely driver shortage. I think it's unfortunately becoming quite real now. And I can understand why so as well, because I think for the longest time drivers have been, either mistreated or not given the respect that they deserve, and they are the reason that logistics companies are running. You can have all the equipment and all the trucks and all the facilities, but if you don't have a driver, it's pointless. So I think one is definitely driver shortage is the main thing, is having enough drivers for all our trucks, being able to account for the fact that they want to go on leaves, they will go home for holidays, having that buffer in place, because now logistics has become, even more demanding. It works in real time. You have to, be operational 24/7. And humans, truck drivers cannot be, so we need to account for buffers. So I think that is one. I think second has definitely been kind of the changing government norms around emissions, whether it's BS4, BS6, changing infrastructure that we have to invest in, trucks getting more expensive. So I think that is a major one too, because also the speed at which the infrastructure of trucks etc. is changing, the way the costs are scaling up, and on the other hand you have companies which are trying to bring down their logistics costs. So this is a little bit of a tricky environment to be in right now, where transporters have to invest a lot, but at the same time they may not be able to get the same freight rates that they would command otherwise. So I think then, but I think there's also an opportunity here as well. There's a lot of green fleet offerings, and I think many clients are willing to kind of pay a premium for those as well. Like, if you're willing to do electric trucks or LNG trucks, because they have their emission targets. And so I think there's some opportunity as well, but I think that's a major challenge. And I think thirdly, again, in terms of cost, the roads and highways are getting better. Tolls are also increasing. And I think it will take a few months or some years for the benefits of that to pass on completely to the transporters. But from now, the clients are wanting to include the toll rates while these things are going to keep significantly increasing. So that's also a bit of a challenge in terms of the costing and the feasibility piece of it all. But I think there are, opportunities to each of these on the flip side, and hopefully solutions as well.
Nikita, you recently visited the Eicher facility. How's the experience?
It was absolutely incredible. It was my first time driving a truck, and I think it was truly eye-opening, meeting so many women transporters. I remember when I first, considered joining the business, I don't think I knew a single female transporter, and until I met, Reema from Reema Transport, and she was a big reason that I decided to join the business. But seeing so many wonderful ladies and hearing their stories and what a fabulous job they were doing was so inspiring and so remarkable. They were just so open to sharing. I think there was no competitiveness of that sort. Like, I could genuinely feel that, they want you to do well. They want to have more women in this industry. And it just felt like such a wonderful, warm and fuzzy place to be in, like a bubble from the rest of the industry. And I think the Eicher team as well, I think just seeing how trucks are made, and how everything is built, seeing, the workers on the entire assembly line, the team of women that's leading it beautifully, the fact that we got to spend time with such senior people, and that, they carved out so much of their day to plan this for us. I think it was, one of the best experiences I've had in my life, hands down.
Nikita, you spoke about, information sharing between the women. Not to stir up a controversy, but do you think women are more open to sharing and teaching others than the men folk?
I think I've not met a lot of transporters, to be general. I think initially when I joined, my philosophy, I don't know if it was just me, but I would meet one or two transporters who would only be complaining about how bad the industry is, and this is, why would you do this, like, New York ka Wall Street chhod ke dhakke khane aa gaye ho. So it was very negative, the whole narrative, and so I decided that I'm not going to meet anyone. So I didn't meet a lot of people from transport. I met someone who told me that get a bouncer, and look, any driver can come with a gun, and so it was just so alarming that I decided to kind of distance myself from that. So I haven't met too many male transporters, but I think in the few that I've met, I definitely saw it was a lot more fear and intimidation, or a lot more warning about what the industry looks like. But with the women, I felt they were extremely welcoming. I remember, as I was telling about Reema, I remember when I went to visit her and she sat me down, and I think it was one of the first few months of me kind of doing it, joining the business, and she just sat me down, went through each process and said, okay, do you need help here? Let me know, this is how we are doing it. And just the transparency and authenticity with which they were talking. And then I remember meeting Meenal ji, and she was, I think, all of them. And even at this event, when I met everyone, where it was Harinder ji, Vandana ji, Anuradha ji, and Reema again, and even the younger ones who were super inspiring, like Icha, Vishakhi, and Hetal, and I think everyone, or Kunjan, who started her own, company. I think with everyone, there was no kind of like, why should I give this? This is a trade secret. I'm not going to share this. When I asked them, okay, we are facing this issue of driver shortage, like, what do you think we can do better? They were very open with ideas. They said, okay, why don't you try this? Do a small event for drivers, have them kind of exchange their problems. Or there were even people who told me that if you want, like, I can help you with drivers, like, don't worry about it. So it was just so warm and friendly, and it just felt like, you're sitting in a group of friends, and then people are genuinely trying to look out for you. I did not get that feeling from anyone that, I think a lot of them even work for the same clients, and they even told me that, that it's never let this affect their relationship. So I think it's truly beautiful.
You've been in the business for a while now. Any regrets? I mean, do you think you would have been better back in the US, or you're happy here now?
That's a great question. I ask myself this every day. But I think for me, like, I was very, as I said, I'm someone who is like, I never regret my choices. I think a lot before I make a choice. I'm super intentional. So that's why I did not join the business for so long, because I knew that only when I loved it, I'll join it. So of course, there are some bad days, things happen, there's an accident or there's something.
That's part and parcel of this business.
Yeah, I think there's something goes wrong and you feel like, okay, why did I do this? But that being said, no, I don't think I would change anything. I think sometimes, I really believe in this quote by Steve Jobs, which is that, you really connect the dots of your life looking backward. And now when I see my life and there's so many incidents, the way they've played out and why it happened and what happened and why did I have to join ANVA at this particular time and how everything fell into place, I think there's a reason I'm here, and hopefully I can live up to the legacy that ANVA has and take it to the next height. So I think don't regret it, but yeah, definitely days that I get a bit worried and upset and frustrated, but yeah, I think.
Well, that's what with every business.
Absolutely.
Finally, Nikita, what are your future plans from here on?
So future plans is, I think, really to take ANVA to the next level. We really want to expand our warehousing footprint. As we said, really play into that end-to-end logistics category, because we do know that piece very, very well. We've been doing it for almost 30 years now. We really want to get into a more national footprint. As I said, we're getting into long-haul transportation as well. Look at that. And bring in more systems, bring in better professionalization, bring in better tech, better digitization, be super future ready, because the rate at which logistics is changing, unless you plan 10 steps ahead, you're not going to be able to keep up. So that's a critical piece. And I think a really big vision and goal that my dad and I have is, we were talking about how margins and profits in the industry have shrunk. And because of that, we don't necessarily are able to pass on the value to our team members, our drivers who are working so hard. And, and they are working 24/7, a lot of them. So one of the visions we have is to really, as we grow the company, make these people partners in our profit. So whether it is, giving them ESOPs and getting public funding or something along these lines, because ultimately we have to find a way to unlock value for them, to help them reach their goals of being able to get a house, being able to get a car. And because we need very good talent in logistics industry, I think it's ripe for transformation. So I think that's, hopefully, fingers crossed, a big visionary goal for us as well.
That, friends, was Nikita Garodia, who got into the industry by fate, but since then has worked hard to make sure she succeeds and excels in whatever she does to take ANVA Logistics to newer heights. Here's wishing Nikita all the best and best of health to her mom. It was a delight meeting the entire family just before the shoot. I'm sure her mom's blessings have come a long way in getting Nikita to where she is today. You have been watching Aishar Presents Nayi Soch Naye Raaste, a Trans India exclusive. We will be back again next week with yet another very interesting conversation. In fact, we will be airing the third episode of our series Partners in Progress. So until next week, stay safe and drive safe. Jai Hind.